Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Charles Sabansi. I want to welcome you guys to another episode of the Dreamerspro Show, where we cover everything from sports, hot topics, classic debates, entertainment, and when we give you guys a fresh perspective on things and how we see them. And today we got a pretty interesting show. But before we get into it, please make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. So let me just go ahead and get into this story here. As you guys know, ESPN has probably been the #1 story this offseason, and especially if you follow major sports like the NBA and NFL, this has been the #1 storyline, right? Especially after all of their high-profile layoffs. A lot of people have been talking about that. Then, of course, you have some of the things that probably the face of the network and Stephen A. Smith has been saying to some people that feel like ESPN is on the decline. Then, of course, you now have people like Dan Le Batard, who's with DraftKings, who's now been responding to Stephen A. Smith. You have that back and forth, but it's all centered around what's taking place at ESPN, right? As you guys know, ESPN laid off 20 on-air front-facing talent because they needed the core cut. They have a $5.5 billion debt that they need to service. So they're looking at ways to cut costs, but also they're not just looking at ways to cut costs, but they're also looking at ways to bring in high-profile, well-established talent to really push the network forward that would also make them a lot of money. One of the reasons you saw them go out there and sign a guy like Pat McAfee, who I'm sure is going to make them a lot of money. We just recently covered a story of how potentially Shannon Sharp could be coming into the fold, to be a part of what they're doing there at ESPN First Take. However, about a week or so ago, we produced a show around the topic of the the Disney CEO Bob Iger talking about selling a majority stake or a portion of his stake in the company, right? We talked about this on the channel. And this morning I was doing some research and I went, of course, back to probably my new favorite website, In Front Office Sports. And they pretty much released an article today that I thought was, they released an article a few days ago, but I just discovered it today, which was pretty surprising to me, because in this article, they're essentially talking about various potential suitors that could actually buy a significant portion of ESPN, because we initially talked about the possibility, but in this particular case, we actually know some of these people some of these companies, these entities that could potentially do it. So that's what I want to get into today's show. But before we get into that, this video is brought to you by sponsor Aura, who's also the official sponsor of the T-Wolves. Do you know what the fastest growing crime in America is today? It's identity theft. Imagine trying to log into your email only to see that your password has been changed. Then you start getting weird notifications from your bank and credit cards, only to find out that all of your personal and sensitive information has been totally compromised. If you think it can happen to you and your family, just know that in 2020, over 49 million Americans were victims to identity theft, costing them a combined $56 billion. That is why we are excited to partner with Aura, who's the sponsor of this video. Aura is the #1 identity theft and financial fraud protection. Aura monitors the dark web and alerts you if any of your passwords and accounts have been breached. And funny enough, after using Aura, I discovered some of my credentials were floating around in the dark web, and the app showed me exactly when and where the breach happened. In addition, Aura allows you to set spending alerts, and they'll notify you of any suspicious transactions. Aura is 4 times faster than any of its competitors in alerting you if someone is trying to open a credit card or obtain a loan using your name. And remember this, every 14 seconds, someone becomes a victim of identity fraud. Don't let it happen to you. Now click the link in the description and try Aura for free for 2 weeks and see if any of you or your family's personal information has been compromised. Start your free trial at aura.com/dreamerspro. And when you try Aura by using the link in the description below, also know that you're supporting this channel. Thank you. So let me just go ahead and get into this article here. Essentially starts off with Disney Chief Executive Officer Bob Iger shook up Wall Street Thursday when he told CNBC he's open to finding a strategic partner for ESPN. Who could that be? Let's start with sports betting operators. Both Disney and ESPN executives have danced around entering the lucrative sports betting game as long as the family-friendly Mouse House keeps its hands clean. Disney's advertising sales does business with numerous betting operators, including DraftKings FanDuel, Caesars Sportsbook, BetMGM, New Jersey Lottery, and Tipico. The U.S. sports industry is also awash in the petrodollars from the foreign countries looking for sports washing investments. I spoke to some sports media advisors about strategic partners that could buy a stake in ESPN or forge a joint venture. I would say sports books for sure, but I would also say another candidate will be Fanatics, said TK Gore, the former media advisor turned head of business development at Kiswe. If you look at Fanatics' database, how valuable is that? They know every purchase I've made. They would be the integration. There would be integration opportunities with the transactional side of it, betting, e-commerce, digital. They could do a lot of creative things. Iger cut his teeth as a young executive for the legendary Rune Aldridge at ABC Sports, whose motto was innovate or die. The 72-year-old chief executive officer still loves sports. He turned down requests from activist investors to spin off ESPN. Instead, he's made it one of three corporate pillars of a reorganized Disney. ESPN is a differentiator for the company, he told analysts. We just have to figure out how to monetize it. Armed with a contract extension through 2026, Iger told CNBC he's open to a strategic partner for ESPN, which could take the form of a joint venture or equity stake. He's focused on streaming as Disney faces the inevitability of offering ESPN direct to consumers. Here are 7 possible candidates. DraftKings, the sports betting giant, and Caesars Entertainment signed co-exclusive deals to serve as ESPN's designated daily fantasy and sportsbooks provider back in September 2020. DraftKings also has a deal with Meadowlark Media, the content startup launched by former ESPN president John Skipper and on-air personality Dan Le Batard. Could Skipper and Le Batard triumphantly return to ESPN Bristol's campus? FanDuel, the other sports betting power player, has money to burn and is willing to spend it. They proved it by handing Pat McAfee the richest contract in sports media, $120 million for 4 years. Now that McAfee is taking his talents to ESPN for $18 million a year, FanDuel could finally turn the network's sports betting ambitions into reality. Then, of course, you have Fanatics, you have Amazon, you have Comcast, you have Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia shook up the hidebound golf industry by bankrolling Greg Norman's Rebel Live Golf against the PGA Tour. And then, of course, you have Omaha Productions. So, essentially, what this article is saying here is that there are a lot of potential suitors out there to partner with ESPN. There was one particular part where they said something that really, really stood out to me, which was this. It said he's focused on streaming as Disney faces the inevitability of offering ESPN direct to consumers. This is where this entire thing is heading. The middleman is slowly getting squeezed out. That's essentially where we are with the advent of various streaming platforms. That is essentially what is taking place. If platforms like, Rumble or YouTube or in other places like that, they didn't exist, then a lot of these guys would have a stranglehold, they would basically control, the way sports is covered. But now that people can go out there, and create their own shows and talk about sports and build audiences, you now have to find a way to deal with that, because people are now saying to themselves, why would I pay a premium to hear you guys talk about sports when I can watch and listen for free? Why would people do that? And this is a real question you have to answer. That's the first thing. The second thing, did you hear some of those names? DraftKings, these guys have limitless amount of money to spend. Literally. And they're going to spend. And I think ESPN and these guys are realizing that, hey, listen, we're going to have to adapt to what's taking place. Why do you think Dan Le Batard, who this article mentioned, signed a $50 million deal with DraftKings back in 2021? A $50 million deal. You heard the one with Pat McAfee. I expect a lot more of these type of stories to be popping up going into the future. I wouldn't be surprised if Shannon Sharpe is another one that gets a mega deal like that. I think the sports media landscape is changing. I think these big guys are probably a little bit late to the party, and now they're doing whatever it takes to adjust. And you see them now going after talent that have already cultivated their audience. I think that's where this thing is going, and I think this thing is going to be changing pretty fast. If you go search on Spotify, on iTunes, or whatever, you will see that all of these guys have their own podcast, literally all of them. And you have to ask yourself the question, why are they doing that? So, hey, these are my thoughts. What I want to know from you guys is, who do you think ESPN will partner with? If they were to partner with anyone, which of these companies that I listed here do you think they most likely will partner with? Whatever you guys think, please leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section. And again, if you want today's full show of the Dreamerspro Show, be sure to check us out on the Dreamerspro podcast that we're going to have linked and pinned in the comment section below on Spotify and iTunes. Catch you guys later. Peace.